Ladies, gentlemen, and my often forgotten, but certainly not by me, salve amulets, welcome to the channel and welcome to another guide. In this guide, we're going to be taking a look at Elite Dungeon 3 with the magic combat style. Now, the favorite combat style over time at ED3 has been with melee. Dating back to its release, melee has always been the popular style here. However, in more of the current metas of RuneScape, any of the combat styles can be used at this dungeon, and obviously mage is no exception to that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this guide. So to start off this guide, let's talk about who this guide is for. Now this guide is just going to be how I personally run through the dungeon. This is not going to be like the best and most insane kills per hour, or like, you know, the most budget friendly preset. I am working on budget guides for all the dungeons with a couple different combat styles on where I think it's applicable to run a budget setup. However, those are still on the back burner and I'm still working out a couple of details on that. So in this one, we're just going to be going over, like I said, my personal preset for running through ED3. So if you're someone who's relatively close to best in slot magic or has best in slot magic and ED3 is staring at you in the face for a collection log, this is the guide for you. This guide should be able to help you run through the dungeon a little bit faster. Usually I get about 4 runs an hour at ED3, sometimes 4.5 if I'm feeling really spicy. And obviously the more runs per hour you can do, in theory, the quicker this collection log will be done with. And to be fair, ED3 isn't terrible GP per hour, however ECB has fallen a long way since the heydays of it being 3 bill for the weapon. I believe they're only about 1.3 bill to 1.5 bill at the time of recording, so the GP per hour is not the greatest here anymore. However, if you love the dungeon and that's what you want to farm out, then farm this dungeon to your heart's content. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the preset and inventory I have for this dungeon. Alrighty, so this is typically the preset I am using when farming out ED3. The armor set is my typical Elite Dungeons armor, where I have it Barrows dyed and it has different perks on it. It's just holding some Slayer perks. You could simply accomplish this by having just a bottom or a top swap and just have the Slayer perk of your choice. I've seen this done with like Virtus armor or just maybe a tier 90 swap or something like that for the parts where you need it, but I decided to be a little bit extravagant since I really enjoy Elite Dungeons and just have a separate armor set. The main one for ED3 that you need is Undead Slayer, as it's helpful for Taraket, or Parakeet as I jokingly call him, and a lot of the trash mobs happen to be undead as well, so 7% damage is always welcome on those. As far as the actual gear is concerned, it's just kind of a standard setup for magic, being that I have my dual wield, my FSOA, and I have just 2 EOFs with Gothic Staff in one, and now the main difference here is that I also bring a Salve Amulet that is mainly for use at Taraket, and sometimes I'll switch to it for the trash mobs, but honestly I usually don't bother. And then I just have a Bladed Dive swap. Now there is an update for the puzzle box if you want to bring that, to where you don't need a swap anymore for Bladed Dive, so if you have it, feel free to bring it. And everything else in my opinion is pretty self-explanatory. The food is just blue blubbers with Super Gothic's Rest. Super G Rest have been updated recently to no longer give Adren, so you can use a pot freely and get the extra 150 health that they offer. This is not required by any means, but it's just something fun to use. The Blast Flask is just there for prayer, since you'll be using Calg Demon with magic. And I went ahead and put a Scripture of 1 in there. It is a useful swap for the trash mobs, however I'm usually pretty lazy and don't swap off Grim, usually because I'm pretty bad about remembering to put it back on and turn it back on for the bosses. So if you want to save the money, go ahead and use Scripture of 1 for the trash mobs and then just use Grim for the bosses and you'll be just fine. Acceleration Potion is nice for a couple places in the dungeon, and the rune pouches are just the standard PVME rune pouch setup for 3 grasping pouches to give you all the spells that you really need. Lucky Charms are there just for a little bit of extra GP, plus the Shadowy Egg comes from ED3, which is anywhere from like 300 mil to a bill, and it's very rare, but you know, might as well bring the Lucky Charms if you're not cramped on inventory space. And the expensive spices are there just to boost the HP of blubbers a little bit. I honestly didn't have anything else that I could toss into the preset to help magic with, so I just tossed it in there for filling out the preset's sake. And other than that, Luck of the Dwarves is just there for negating cheese and tomato bada when I'm doing the trash mobs, and Reaver's Ring is there for the big boy crit chance that you want when using magic. Last but not least, T88 swap is just a Coroming swap for a G-Chain, so that way you can target a lot of mobs at once and use something like Detonate or Omnipower or even G-Conk or something like like that, just to get out some extra AoE damage. Also, I just put a defender there, just kind of a for funsies type thing. You can bring a T90 shield if you want, however, you don't really need to go for reses with magic, being that you have blood barrage autos to give you a lot of HP back, should you need it for something like Taraket. But if a tier 90 shield or even an arcane just suits the kind of OCD or perfectionism in a preset, the way it looks in the inventory, or if it just gives you that peace of mind to make your nerves a little bit more calm, go ahead and bring whatever shield you like. Also, the hybrid Zuck cape is not necessary if you only have the normal mode magic one, so bring whichever cape you have. The relics are the same per usual: Death Ward, Conservation of Energy, and Fury of the Small. I'm hoping the Luck of the Dwarves relic gets a rework soon to where it costs a lot less relic power, so it's more useful. However, I won't hold my breath over it, and I'll just use the ring until that update comes. Anyways, if you have any questions about the gear that I'm using, feel free to leave it in the comments below. But let's go ahead and get into how to actually run this dungeon. Alrighty, we have our preset loaded up, we're ready to go. Just a couple quick notes before we get started. Have Undead Slayer Sigil if you have it bound somewhere, and also, if you really want to go crazy, you could bind Demon Slayer, however I just click it from right here while doing the one Calg Demon in the dungeon. And as far as aura selection is concerned, I usually just run Maniacal. You can run Majorat and G-Staff the first boss, because the first boss does have a little bit of a higher defense than the other two. But I just run Maniacal. It's not really too big of a deal, because you always have autocast Blood Barrage to help you out in a pinch. Alright, without any further rambling though, let's go ahead and get into this dungeon. Go here, make sure our pocket slot is on, fail, hit no, and then normal mode. And then what I like to do here, right at the start, is Surge Bladed Dive. Put on my Roaming Swap, target this guy here for a G-Chain and hit Omni, and then this one didn't get hit. It's like, this spawn pattern is kind of random, so sometimes you get all four, sometimes you don't. And then what I like to do here is Bladed Dive Surge over, freeze the center one with an Ice Barrage, and then don't do anything else. Then G-Chain, charge up a Detonate, put on your two-hand, and release it with an auto and a deep breath. Bladed Dive Surge up to here, target the center one and hit Ice Barrage, auto Tsunami, and you can G-Chain here if you want, but usually it's kind of a waste. And then just run through, use any basics to clear those guys up. Here I'll just use something like a D-Breath, maybe an Ice Rack here, and into a Corrupt Blast. And then what I like to do here is equip my Bladed Dive, click on this portion of the wall, and then Surge Bladed Dive over to this corner here. And then these guys, I'll just G-Chain Omni. And then use basics to clean up anything left. Surge Bladed Dive, I like to run into this corner. Let them kind of get around this little barrier here, and then just G-Chain into a charge, detonate, and release a D-Breath. Usually there's one left. Most of the time they like to line up nicer if you're a little bit faster getting in the corner. I was a little bit slow there. And here I'll just run into this corner. Maybe use a Corrupt Blast into a G-Chain Wild. And then you can target cycle anything left. Target cycle is really nice for elite dungeons because you can just immediately cycle through all the targets around you. And it's kind of nice for finding, like, you know, the straggler or something like that. Or if something has a really small hitbox, like the little crabs, like these little guys here, the little scuttlers. Sometimes target cycle is really nice for getting on those because you're not sitting there trying to click on it as it's moving around and whatnot. But there, just use G-Chain with maybe a Threshold. These guys, I just like to do Corrupt into an Ice Rack. Maybe a G-Conk into a D-Breath. And one more Ice Rack just for good measure. And here, I'll put on my Reaver's Ring, make sure my Grim is still on. Run to this tile here, and then Anticipate, Surge, and then TC a Sun with a Smoke Cloud. And it's just a standard Sun rotation from here. So Nami into a Staff Spec. I'm going to swap over to Insanguinate, see if I can get any crits. Did not get any crits. 2 Hit Asphyx into a G-Conk for my Omni Power. I'm just going to go ahead and get another G-Conk. Use an ABS. Use a basic so I can run over. If you get hit once by it, it's not the end of the world. Maybe go into Attendees here. And Wild Magic is fixed, should be dead. Yep, there we are. Just wait for the animation of the death to go through, and then you can surge through. Put on the Bladed Dive swap. And here's the first place I like to use my acceleration potion. Kind of surge Bladed Dive around through this area. And once you get here, I like to G-Chain, run behind this guy and charge at Detonate, and release it with D-Breath. And then I like to surge Bladed Dive up to here, use a G-Chain, and then hit Omni. You won't get all of them. There's usually one that it won't hit because there's just one too many targets here. But you can just keep an eye out for that one, and then just target it with like a Wild Magic, and then just surge Bladed Dive through here accordingly. Click Jump Down the Cliff. And then here, I'll just do another Detonate with a D-Breath. Bladed Dive across, surge, and then on this guy, I like to just do Wild Magic into an Ice Rack. Maybe a D-Breath to finish it off for an impact. And here, I like to freeze these guys with an Ice Barrage, G-Chain into an Omni. And I will use my Sigil for these, just to make sure they die. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they're on 1k, you know, it depends. If you really want to make sure they die, you can use the Salve Ambi E for that 15% damage. But surge Bladed Dive down here, and I'll just use some abilities, usually just a Threshold like a Wild Magic. And what I like to do here is equip my Bladed Dive, and then Bladed Dive through the wall over to this artifact here. You activate this artifact, surge back, surge across, and then kill this Necromancer. Just a couple of abilities. And then just activate this one. Those are the only two mobs you need to kill here in this section, and then just activate those, and that's what opens up to the gate here. Like the Devotion and Surge, target the middle guy, spamming Ice Barrage. Maybe use a Corrupt into a G-Chain Omni. Use an Ice Rack on this guy and a Wild Magic on him. This is probably the only point where you're going to use a bit of food, because everything does kind of hurt there. And then I just Bladed Dive across. I'll usually freeze these guys with a Corrupt Blast. Maybe go into an Ice Rack and D-Breath. Didn't get the D-Breath off. Ice Rack has a lot of damage, and you can use it every other ability, so it's kind of nice. And here I like to Surge and Bladed Dive across. That'll prevent any of those mobs over there from aggroing you. Now what I like to do here is kind of spicy, but what I'll do is I'll do a Tsunami, and then Snaff Spec as kind of like a pre-build for the upcoming boss. Then what I do is Surge Bladed Dive, make sure everything is equipped, Anticipate. Oh, didn't make the surge, but you know, happens. And just like Wild Magic is fixed, Tendies. And just get him down as much as I can. I got lucky on the auto attacks there, but basically you just surge in with a meta and use the last bit of your staff spec and crit buff to just absolutely murk him with a metamorph. And so this way you only have to do a little bit of damage to this phase because you got him down in a pre-phase. Sometimes you get lucky on pre-phase, sometimes you don't. It's just, you know, a dice roll, depending on what auto attack he's doing on. And then here, I'll just go into a natty on this rift here, use a corrupt just before it dies. And then go for a Nami, a staff spec. We got lucky there with a Relent. And auto-cast Blood Barrage for this Metamorph. You can also G-Chain for some extra crits. And just spam ABS. Maybe using this fix here. Maybe another G-Chain into like a G-Staff or something. It's a kind of a weak Metamorph. And he's dead. Autocast Blood Barrage will save you there just because of all the healing you're going to be doing and all the mobs that are going to be around you. G-Chain Omni on this set of minions. And once the run's over, I'll do a recap on my Parakeet method and my Ambassador method as well for the upcoming part. This Calg, I just like to do kind of like a Wild Magicus fix with the Demon Slayer. Didn't even need these fixed there. Now here's the second portion where I will A-pot. Or not A, yeah, Excel pot. Not Adrenaline Potion. And I just kind of Bladed Dive Surge around, and I'll attack this guy first. Just use maybe a Threshold and a couple basics, and then on the second one, just use maybe a Wild Magic with an Ice Rack, and then you're off to the races. And then here, you only have to kill this guy. And then this one right here. And then you can open up the gate and continue through the dungeon. So what I like to do from this tile is just Bladed Dive over, and then click Dive Abyss, and you'll jump right over through all the rocks and whatnot. And you're off to the races. Here, what I like to do is kind of go to this corner over here. I've been kind of playing with which one I want, or I like better, but just a G chain with a detonate here, release with a D breath. Maybe put a corrupt on this guy. Should be all of them. There we go. And this one, I'll just do G chain Omni with maybe a D breath, Ice Rack. The gate's open. Now here, I will Bladed Dive. I messed it up here. But usually I Bladed Dive to the center here, just so I get the aggro of the two Warp Skellies. And these guys will stay in place, because if you aggro the skeletons at the wrong time, these guys will spread out and it gets a little bit more obnoxious, but with magic it's slightly more forgiving since you have G-Chain instead of worrying about Shin range. Now, this is probably the most annoying part of the dungeon. If these skeletons are too close to this mini-boss here, it will aggro, as you can see there. He kind of crossed this line and it made it the mini-boss aggro. But you can just deal with it accordingly. If you get stunned by the mini-bosses as fixed, just Freedom it and kill the Warp Skeletons accordingly with Wild Magic as fixed, maybe some Ice Racks and a couple G-Chains. And then what I'll do here is just go to the bank real quick, hit Freedom, load my preset again, just so I have everything for Ambassador, and Surge on down. Equip my Reaver's Ring. And I usually stand on this tile here, Anticipate, Surge, and then TC with a Smoke Cloud into my Sun. Triple Basic, and then just kind of do a standard Sun rotation from here. So Nami into a Staff Spec, into a Wild Magicus Fix, into a G-Conk, Omni Power. I'm just waiting for this little plant to go down, and it will plant for 2 ticks instead of just 1 like the other bosses. So just wait a little bit before you move out of the way of it. Here I'll do another ABS. You just have to stun this thing once. Some people Vitpod it, I usually don't feel like it. And I just stun it. And just get him down to 650 as soon as possible. Now if you get the second plant here, you can just plant over here in this corner area. And then I like to target cycle as they're shooting out to get this one down as quick as possible. And you can just use thresholds and basics. G-Conk's really powerful on these, and you just kill the fragments as you go around, or the Roombas as I like to call them. Now what I like to do is try and get off a Natty into a Sun, usually starting with this one, so that way I have Sun for the last phase, or as soon as possible. I'll just plant my Sunshine over here, maybe G-Conk this guy. That didn't quite get him, but it's fine. Go over to my Sun, get my Tsunami built up with my Staff Spec. G-Conk, and kind of just follow a more standard Sun rotation, and just Disrupt Shield this hit. Get off ABSs as necessary. You get a lot of crits, even better. Don't forget to get off your tendies before the Sunshine is over with. Oh, we kind of KO'd ourselves there, but not really important as sun was over anyway. And now I'm just going to go ahead and build up. And basically just try and get another sunshine off. I have about 7 seconds, so I'll just kind of chill out for a bit. And I like to plant my sun under, and now we have a pot for this sun. So again, I'll just auto tsunami. Oh, once it's off cooldown. Staff spec, and now I like to just run under for funsies until I see where the little hand is coming from. Wild Magic is fix into a G-Conk. Omni. And try not to be too close when you use your ABS, because it will walk yourself. And then for this, just Devotion and Pray Magic, and then just kill them. And there you go. That is a Elite Dungeon 3 run. Now I'm just going to teleport out quickly before this guy starts to murk me. And I'll go ahead and discuss my boss methods again, even because I felt like I was a little bit rushed there because, you know, everything kind of happens quickly, so I don't feel like I explained it the best, so I'll go ahead and do that now. Alrighty, for Parakeet, or Taraket as he's known, I just like to call him Parakeet for funsies. What I do is there are 2 necromancers here and 2 big skeletons that you have to kill. So what I like to do is pre-build with my Tsunami and my FSOA spec, so that way once I kill all of them, I can just go ahead and Surge Bladed Dive down to here, and then I usually run this corner and Surge in. And so what I'll usually do is do an anticipate here or something like that. Like as I'm rounding the corner, like I'll anticipate and then surge and then hit metamorph, and that'll start the boss fight. And then you can just target cycle with a Vuln Bomb down, and then just use a Wild Magic, a 2-hit Asphyx, a Tendies, and an Omni Power. That's all you're really gonna have time to get off inside of a metamorph. But the additional damage from metamorph plus the effects from the Salve Amulet and your Sigil, usually you're going to be able to nuke all of the 200,000 damage that you have to do for the start of the fight to get him to phase. Or I think it's a little bit more. I think it's a little more than 200, but you have to get him to 200k. That's where his soft cap is. And he won't check for the soft cap to go over to the different pillars until his next auto attack. So depending on your rotation and his auto attack pattern that he gets, you can either get him to like maybe 180, or I've seen it as low as like 70k left. Now if you get him below 100k, the phase 2 portion will just not exist and he'll immediately go over to the other one. So you can just go ahead and use the bloats to get up another Tsunami and a staff spec for another metamorph. And what's nice is when you have the bloats here and everything else, you can G-chain to get additional crits and then use something like Omni Power, and all of the crits that you see will count towards adrenaline for you to get basically to 100, and then you can just ABS spam, use your Wild, your Asphyx, your Tendies. You can use all those abilities to just absolutely destroy a Parakeet. Sometimes you might not get as lucky with the phasing, so what you want to do if you're not as lucky with the pre-phase, or, you know, getting his HP down on the first phase, is just threshold the second phase. You know, Wild Magic Asphyx and maybe a G-Conk and some other stuff. You could walk him a couple times with some bleeds or something like that, or maybe toss in something fancy like a Magma Tempest. Anything to help nuke that bit of HP. The most you're going to have to do is like 100k, which with Salve Amulet, again, it's not going to take too long to do, and you should be able to get through it just fine. Alrighty, and for the kind of big picture ideas for Ambassador, and what I like to do is I'll usually... I try to preemptively get a Disruption Shield off, so that way the first magic hit doesn't hit you and you can just Soul Split, but sometimes I forget, as you saw in that run. What I'll usually do is I'll just be at 100%, and then I'll Anticipate, and then Surge, and then Target Cycle, Smoke Cloud, and Sunshine, all in the same kind of tick, like that. And then I just go through and start a normal sunshine rotation with an adrenaline potion. And, you know, whatever crits I get is whatever crits I get. And sometimes it'll phase at like 33 seconds. Other times it'll take almost the full minute. It just depends on the RNG you get with your crits. Then once phase 1 is over, I like to go down here to the south corner. And then I will kind of stand off to the left just a little bit, and as you if you use target cycle, you can target this crystal here much earlier, like basically when the animation starts to spawn. Even before they start shooting out, you can target cycle this guy and get maybe like an ice rack or a couple bleeds off with a G-conk, and usually kill this one, because this one's usually really annoying to kill if you're starting south and then going counterclockwise like the boss forces you to. After that, you can just go through this one and then kill all the rest of them. On this fourth one over here, I usually like to do a natty and then kind of plant my sun maybe somewhere in this area, and then just kill the last one. And so that way, the earlier you get your sun off, the quicker your sun's going to be off cooldown for the final phase. It's kind of the one drawback about magic, is going faster requires you to put down a sun, and you're kind of limited on that cooldown, but you know, it is what it is. And then for the last phase, you just bring up another sun with an A-pot. I like to plant it under him just to make life a little bit easier, and then I'll usually G-conk under and wait to see which hand is active, and then just kind of walk around him from there. Make sure that you're not like under his hitbox, because if you're under it and then you try and arm it with battle staff, your character will force walk out, and then you only get one hit of your ABS, and that's kind of a waste of adren. So just be mindful of that. But what you can do is tendies and his fix and everything, you can use those underneath and stay underneath to basically wait longer if you have to see which hand, or you know, just stay outside. It honestly doesn't matter too much. And if you get the magic onslaught hit, just turn on protect magic or deflect magic, use devotion, and you should be fine, and he should be dead before the second one is even close to coming. Other than that, I hope this guide was helpful for you. Let's go ahead and roll that outro. Ladies, gentlemen, and I did not forget about you salve amulets. Thank you very much for watching. Your viewership is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next video. Peace.